So I believe that last time we began talking about the outer being as seen by Aurobindo. We first started with the physical body, and we talked about three gunas, which is a concept that's been around in Hinduism for thousands of years. Does anybody remember what those three are? Danielle, you've got your fingers up. Go for it.
Yeah. Tamas, Raga,
That,
and
oh,
Sa.
Oh,
okay. She got it right. Yeah.
Of course.
okay, yeah. And those are the components that all of us are made of, and not just humans, but all sorts of other things. And we looked at the components of the physical man, and then the type of mind that gets connected to the physical self, which is very repetitive, unstoppable. If you've ever tried meditating, that's one of the things that will drive you crazy. And then we talked about environmental consciousness, which is an aura around us, extending some feet, perhaps even beyond our bodies. So tonight we're going to start with the next layer of human beings. All of us have it, that Aurobindo calls the vital mind, vital man. So a person who focuses attention on the vital plane is regarded by Aurobindo as a vital man or woman. Their life choices are made with the concerns of the vital body uppermost in their minds. The principles of matter and mind are only important insofar as they serve the vital body. So the vital body is composed of a much subtler substance than the physical. Sorry, papers everywhere. It's a substance surcharged with conscious energy, capable of much more powerful perceptions, capacities, sense activities than any of the gross atomic elements of earth matter can offer. Okay, I need to screen share again. And let's see if I do this. I can go here. Now we're on reading 23. Oop, where's my, I can't tell where the, I should have done this earlier. Okay. Oh, 21. Well, let's go backwards in the alphabet. So we'll start with Nina tonight.
The vital man is concerned with self-affirmation, self-aggrandizement.
Oh, sorry. It was my mistake, Nina. I confused everybody. It's actually 21.
All right.
Okay.
The vital is a thing of desires, impulses, force pushes, emotions, sensations, seekings after life fulfillment, possession, and enjoyment. These are its functions and its nature. It is that part of us which seeks after life and its movements for their own sake, and it does not want to leave hold of them if they bring it sufferings as well as or more than pleasure. It is even capable of luxuriating in tears and suffering as part of the drama of life. Sri Aurobindo, Letters on Yoga.
So the vital body consists of that energy assigned by the cosmic life force to an individual for their use during their specified lifetime. This one force assumes a myriad of different forms in the individual, each of which is consistent with the objects of the cosmic life force. Okay, so is Eva online? I wasn't sure if I saw her or not. Linda? Oh, there's
Yes,
Eva. Hi.
Yes. Yeah.
There she is, out in the outdoors.
That's right. And by the way, I was privileged to be at the 19-day feast which Wayne hosted.
Oh.
So you very much for including him in our class today. Life is, as it manifests itself upon earth with matter as its basis, is essentially a form of one cosmic energy, a dynamic movement or current, with positive and negative, a constant act or play of the force which builds up forms, energizes them by a continual stream of stimulation, and maintains them by an unceasing process of disintegration and renewal of their substance. Sri Aurobindo, the Life Divine.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the vital plane is dominated by the quality rajas, the force of kinesis or movement. The vital person therefore lives in a state of consciousness full of desire, activity, and passion. Okay, number 23. How about Linda Russell?
23. The vital man is concerned with self-affirmation, self-aggrandizement, life enlargement, satisfaction of ambition and passion, and impulse and desire. The claims of his ego, domination, power, excitement, battle and struggle, inner and outer adventure. All else is incidental or subordinated to this movement and building and expression of the vital ego.
Okay. So then when compared with the physical person, the vital being is more active, stronger, and more mobile, more turbulent and chaotic, often to the point of being quite unregulated. Through the practice of yoga, the vital individual may raise himself beyond the conceptions and energies natural to the desire soul and the desire plane. By developing their mental capacities, they may attain a certain degree of spiritual realization. Now, maybe Harold could read number 24 for us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it can.
But you can't see me. Okay, sorry. Anyway, I'll read number
Oh, there you are.
24.
You're there.
Yeah. Oh, good. In this spiritual realization, there would be a less strong necessity of quietism, for there would be a greater possibility of an active effectuation of the bliss and power of the eternal, mightier and more self-satisfied powers, a richer flowering of the dynamic infinite. Nevertheless, that effectuality could never come anywhere near to a true and integral perfection, for the conditions of the desire world are like those of the physical improper, improper to the development of the complete spiritual life.
Yeah, it's hard to get used to his cadence, isn't it? Sometimes you have to read these things more than one time to.
If I saw it ahead of time, I would put a comma in certain places.
I'm tempted to do that, but I don't want to be, untrustworthy.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. So the inclusion of the vital nature in the individual's sadhana, which is their practice, spiritual practice, enables them to attain a vision of the active aspect of the divine, the Brahman with qualities. And we were calling that the Saguna Brahma. In this sense, the vital person is capable of a fuller spiritual realization than the physical individual. But at the same time, the strength of their attachment to the vital plane usually means that they have either left it behind altogether in their flight to the spirit, or remain enchained by life, limited in his self-fulfillment by the downward pull of the desire world and its dominant rajasic principle. So I'm sure each one of you has struggled with that very question as to whether or not you can get control of that passionate self of yours and allow the spirit to take over. This is where a lot of people spend many, many years. And it's a matter of turning away from the lower nature to the upper nature in Baha'i terms.
Mark, can I
Well,
ask you a question here?
Certainly. Yep, go ahead.
Isn't some of this vitality necessary for human existence? I mean, I realize, he's painting this in mainly negative terms, but isn't that some of this necessary for the business of living to survive and so on and so forth?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's not entirely negative then.
Oh, no, no. No, he's just describing what each of us is built with. Some of us have very strong Rajasic forces in us, others don't.
Okay.
But I mean, if you're Napoleon, you're supremely powerful that way. And you're capable of doing all kinds of good or evil. But if you're a tamasic type, if you're living in the physical world and you're affected by its inertia, the chances of you actually doing something with your life are much less likely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So no possibility of an integral reconciliation of these two realms would seem to exist for the vital person. For this reason, Aurobindo concludes that the vital plane does not provide a suitable basis for the development of a complete spiritual life, not by itself. Aurobindo arranges the myriad of individual workings of the life force into 5 broad categories, each determined by its position relative to the other planes of consciousness. So regrettably, we do not have time to review each of these here. You're probably relieved to hear that. However, it's important to distinguish the vital mind from the mind on its own. So remember last time we talked about what the physical mind was like. Now we're going to talk about the vital mind. So aside from the thinking mind, which resides on its own plane, there is a part of the mind which is intermixed with the vital, which Aurobindo calls the vital mind. This is dominated by the impulses, desires, and mixtures and feelings of the vital nature. Okie dokie. How about Bonnie? Number 25.
Mind and vital are mixed up on the surface of the consciousness, but they are quite separate forces in themselves. And as soon as one gets behind the ordinary surface consciousness, one sees them as separate, discovers their distinction, and can, with the aid of this knowledge, analyze their surface mixtures.
So the reasoning of the vital mind is actually a kind of pseudo-reasoning. Thus, the mind usurped by the vital dedicates itself to providing plausible, rational explanations and justifications for the impulses and desires of the vital. The surface being is primarily motivated by desire. Aurobindo understands desire to be the result of the limited surface consciousness with its incumbent feelings of incompleteness and insufficiency. Desire is the urge to possess and enjoy that which is not yet possessed or enjoyed. Okay, so let's zoom on here to number 26. Page, and I know Jennifer's here, so how about 26 for me?
Desire seeks to attain a physical, vital, moral, mental increase by a more and more all-embracing experience, a more and more all-embracing possession, absorption, assimilation. Enjoyment is the inevitable, fundamental, eradicable impulse of existence. Once divided and individualized, yet ever secretly conscious of its all-embracing, all-possessing infinity. The impulse to realize that secret consciousness is the spur of the cosmic divine, the lust of the embodied self within every individual creature. Sri Aurobindo.
Well, it's an interesting point he's making here, that embedded within the passions of the vital are, if you like, the first suggestions of an attraction to the spiritual, to unity, unification with everyone around you and a greater whole. Desire is thus the catalyst of evolution and expansion in cosmic and individual life. Aurobindo reasons that it must continue to function in some form until evolution reaches its termination in the divine. Okie dokie. How about Linda O'Neill? 27.
Sorry, what number is it?
27?
27, okay. This involvement of desire must and ought to continue until the individual has grown sufficiently so that he can now at last become master of himself, and by increasing union with the infinite possessor of his universe. Desire is the lever by which the divine life principle affects its end of self-affirmation in the universe. Sri Aurobindo, the life divine.
The lever. There's got to be a spur to keep us going. Desire generates a sense of purpose in human beings. Its acquisitive nature impresses itself upon the individual, who responds by marshaling his personal resources in an all-out effort to attain the object of desire. Remember when you met your first love of your life? How that rearranged everything you did? Ethical judgments of good and evil revolve around the individual's selection of objects, not around the nature of desire itself, which is colorless. This collection of personal forces creates an impression of a self, a center of consciousness, usually called the soul. Aurobindo regards this as a misnomer, preferring the term desire soul as a label for this outward formation of consciousness, which works in our vital cravings, our emotions, our aesthetic faculty, and mental seeking for power, knowledge, and happiness. Okay, number 28 is for David Oak.
Here we go. This soul of desire is a separative soul of ego, and all its instincts are for a separate self-affirmation. It pushes always, open or under more or less shining masks, for its own growth, for possession, for enjoyment, for conquest and empire.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Wow, getting a little confused. Back to those three gunas.
Right.
I thought that tamas was bodily and, basically seeking comfort. And rajas was vital and seeking activity. And sattvas was mental and seeking refinement of some kind. So they're rank ordered. I thought that, in other words, sattva is better than rajas and rajas is better than tamas. But he's doing something different, I think, Aurobindo. He's reinterpreting Hindu tradition. Is this your understanding? He's doing something a little different. Like he's making rajas quite, well, here it looks like it could be dangerous. It could lead to conquest and empire. But it could also lead to, enormous energy for positive, constructive projects in the world, right?
Fair enough. Yep, absolutely right.
So, in other words, well, later on, maybe we'll see what he says about sattva or the mental as Anyway, I better just shut up. It looks like he's not exactly sticking with the Bhagavad Gita's version of these three gunas. It looks like he's amplifying them and reinterpreting, maybe with a little bit of Western evolutionary instinct or something in here.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's right, Harold. And I think this is one of the difficulties in understanding Sri Aurobindo's prose. He not only has his own special vocabulary, which Mark is teaching us, but he's redefining common terms in English in his own way.
Okay, yeah.
This makes it even more difficult sometimes to understand what he's saying, because he's reinterpreting words like soul and ego. So there's a lot of transvaluation of values going on in his prose, and it makes it sometimes difficult to follow.
You know, he's bringing the East into the West and the West into the East.
Yeah.
As near as I can see, like a synthesis. Anyway, okay, I'm just going to keep listening. Sorry, yeah.
And it's fair to say, Harold, that the, generally speaking, the physical world is taken care of by the tamas, whereas the vital world is under the rule of rajas, and the mind is supposedly under the influence of sattva. But there's a mixture in every individual who's alive at all of those levels.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So it gets a little complicated when you get down to the individual level. So we're just painting with broad strokes at this point. Okay, let me see where we are at here. Oh, okay. So the desire soul is an expression of all the surface beings' unfulfilled longings for knowledge, power, and happiness. This lack of fulfillment results from the separation of the ego from the vast world of not self, a pragmatic division which fosters ignorance. As Aurobindo graphically describes its situation, the desire soul is shut off by egotistic walls of great thickness, which have indeed gates of penetration. But in their entry through them, the touches of the divine cosmic delight become dwarfed, distorted, or have to come in masked as their own opposites. That's quite an interesting statement. So we're being touched by the divine without really knowing it, and often calling it by other names. Now let's see number 29 here. Mary, are you up to reading tonight?
Sorry, thank you. I can pass it this time.
Okay. That brings me then to, is Sylvia online? I didn't see her initially.
Sylvie's here.
Oh, great. Okay, Sylvie, take it away.
Okay. The desire soul's ignorance manifests itself as egoistic passion, blind instinctive affections, and all the play of the life impulses with their imperfections, perversions, often sordid degradations. A heart besieged and given over to the lusts, desires, wraths, intense or fierce demands, or little greeds and mean pettinesses of an obscure and fallen life force, and debased by its slavery to any and every impulse.
Kind of a gloomy picture, but it makes you feel compassion for everyone who's under this influence. And maybe it gives you some idea as to what they're struggling with that you can help them to overcome. The sphere of influence of this desire soul is extensive. Its insidious perfume pervades even the least egocentric activities of humans, even those that are ethical or religious, even those that wear the guise of altruism, philanthropy, self-sacrifice, self-denial, are shot through and through with the threads of its making. Therefore, Aurobindo sees no alternative but to usurp the desire soul from its position of authority and replace it with its uncorrupted counterpart, the psyche, in order to cultivate the individual's spiritual health. Desire itself is not to be exiled from the personality, though. It will be transformed into a higher, purer, and more spiritual form by the psyche. It is the self-aggrandizing soul of desire that must be ousted in favor of a wider, less self-interested authority. The psyche is ordinarily hidden from the view of the surface being by reason of its extreme subtlety. Nevertheless, it constitutes a pure power of light, love, joy, and refined essence of being, which is our true soul behind the outer form of psychic existence we so often dignify by the name the soul. And this is starting to feel a little bit like the trust of God that Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha were talking about. That thing that we're very little acquainted with, that needs to take center stage. Okay, so that's enough of the vital. Let's move on now to the mental body, the third major component of the surface personality. So let's first look at it in its pure form, undiluted by dealings with the vital or physical planes. Let me see here. Hangame, could you read number 30 for me?
For sure. The mind is a mental or subtle body which enjoys capacities of knowledge, perception, sympathy, and interpenetration with other beings, hardly imaginable by us, and a free, delicate, and extensive mentalized sense faculty, not limited by the grosser conditions of the life nature or the physical nature.
So if you were describing your own mind, how many of these adjectives would you use for yourself? He's got a broad view, I think, here that he's talking about. Not everybody is going to have all of these capabilities to a full extent. But he's even more specific. In number 31, which I'm hoping Zilda will read, we have a clearer idea.
In the language of this yoga, the words mind and mental are used to connote specifically the part of the nature which has to do with cognition and intelligence, with ideas, with mental or thought perceptions, the reaction of thought to things, with the truly mental movements and formations, mental vision and will, etc., that are part of his intelligence.
So in Aurobindo's conception, the human mind is an instrument which measures, limits, cuts out forms of things from the indivisible whole, and contains them as if each were a separate integer. In other words, all operations of the mind, whether conception, perception, sensation, or the dealings of creative thought, proceed on the basis of division. This proclivity for creating artificial boundaries rules out any possibility of a mental perception of wholes. Mind is an instrument of analysis and synthesis, but not of essential knowledge. We never get to know the essence of anything. Whatever the mind labels as a whole is merely the sum of data which exceeds its limited power of assimilation as a unit.
Mark, I have a question. It's Linda O.
Yes, please, go ahead.
What is your understanding of what's been termed the rational soul in Abdu'l-Baha's writings? Is it the same as the mind, do you think? Is it
It-
a lower level of what we generally refer to as the soul? Is it the same as the soul? I'm always been confused about this.
You're raising a very interesting and difficult question. I need to spend a little more time reading Abdu'l-Baha, and that's what I'm reserving my time between now and the middle of July to do. To when I come to compare Abdu'l-Baha's way of exploring the stages of the soul with Aurobindo's. I'm at this point leaning towards the idea that the rational soul that Abdu'l-Baha is talking about must be very similar in some ways here, but I'm not 100% sure that it's in total alignment.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. If I can jump in, I think the phrase "the rational soul" that is used in translation is pointing to reason, which, as you point out, is of course one of the functions of the mind, although mind is a much broader concept. I think the original term in Arabic or Persian is aql, which can be translated as reason or rational soul.
Yeah.
Or intellect?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the rational soul could be understood as intellect.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Okay.
And Mark,
Mhm.
I'm noticing I have my little Hindu encyclopedia here. For
Okay.
mind, they have things that translate, the intellectual mind on one hand and spiritual consciousness on the other. And so there's a translation problem between Sanskrit and English. And it looks like, we use the word mind to cover two different things entirely in Hindu, in the Hindu background. And he's going to break it down even further, I'm sure.
Yes, he is.
But so there's the intellectual mind, and you might say the spiritual mind, or spiritual consciousness, and then he's going to break that into many levels, as you'll show us. But
That's right.
rational mind looks like it's dealing with reasoning and breaking things apart and putting them back together, as you described. So
Yeah.
it's a lower form of what the mind is capable of.
I think that's fair.
Yep, I agree. That's right. That's correct analysis. Yeah.
And you're right, Aurobindo is going to go into a lot of detail, which is one of the reasons I am including him in this whole course.
Yeah.
Because he has some very interesting things to say about what is greater than our regular mind. He's got 4 levels or 5 levels of mind above it.
I think in the West, mind is predominantly associated with the rational faculty, whereas in Hinduism, judging from what Harold is saying, they have somewhat of a different concept. And once again, this becomes all the more difficult because, as I've noticed in this lesson, Sri Aurobindo is constantly reinterpreting terms all the time. So he's very challenging to keep up with sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's what you're here for, Mark, right?
Well, thank you for hanging in there. Okay. Now, where was I? Okay.
32.
Yeah, did we actually read 32?
I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, that's right. I was going to ask Peter to do that. Okay.
Mind is that which does not know, which tries to know, and which never knows except as in a glass darkly. It is the power which interprets truth of universal existence for the practical uses of a certain order of things. It is not the power which knows and guides that existence, and therefore it cannot be the power which created or manifested it. Sri Aurobindo, The Life Divine.
Mhm. So such divine attributes as infinity, timelessness, and formlessness will always remain beyond its grasp. I hardly even need to say it. Okay, Jack, do you want to read 33 for us?
33. Okay, here we go. Mind can conceive with precision divisions as real. It can conceive a synthetic totality or the finite extending itself indefinitely. It can grasp aggregates of divided things and the sameness underlying them. But the ultimate unity and absolute infinity are to its conscience of things abstract notions and unseizable quantities, not something that is real to its grasp, much less something that is alone real. So he's pointing here to the limitation, the power of the mind, but also the limitations of the mind, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, I find I resonate with this quite well. It seems like a legitimate point that he's making here. Does anybody disagree with that? I like how he says that all these different things where we think we're conceiving of wholes or totals, but really we're kind of fooling ourselves. And you run into that, you know, you come face to face with that all the time when you're reading the writings of Baha'u'llah. That I mean, he's frequently going off the deep end in terms of my understanding into areas that are just become abstract to me because I just don't have any knowledge of what he's talking about, or very little. So I take him on faith. Harold, you look very puzzled. Or is your picture frozen?
I think your picture's frozen, Harold.
Oh,
Are you still with us? No, he's muted. Okay.
Can you hear me?
yes, I can.
Yeah, it's hard for me to unmute on your system. I don't know why. I go back and forth very easily.
That's weird.
Unfortunately, my face froze in a bewilderment look, but it was bewilderment is positive. I look like I'm suffering when I'm enjoying, you know,
okay,
the heights of existence. So no, I'm not. There's no suffering here. Just admiration for these ideas.
Well, I guess I'm not doing my job then. I'm trying for suffering.
Yeah. Now, I'm very aware of the mind's limits. You see, yeah, I mean, I break things up into pieces and put them back together. I'm using the mind all the time. And I also, a part of me knows that that's just a little game. There's something bigger out there. And that must mean I have more, there's more to me than a rational mind.
Exactly.
That's all, yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, that's precisely the problem with Western philosophy, Harold. Philosophers in the West, they think the rational mind can do everything, but it can't. It can only analyze, classify, make distinctions, but Aurobindo's saying here, I mean, these things are necessary in philosophy to classify things, to make distinctions and so on, and break things down. But he's saying that this is not reality. There's a transcendent field beyond this that is alone real.
Occasionally you get someone in Western philosophy like Thomas Aquinas, who near the end of his life said, everything I've written is like straw. Mm-hmm. In other words, there was part of him that saw that, he was good at analysis and synthesis, but that reality was way larger, right? So That can be depressing or exhilarating, depending on your mood. You know,
Well, in the Baha'i faith, is not the pinnacle of knowledge the realization that you really don't know anything?
that's it. Yes, that should be something to celebrate. You,
Okay, so although mind is the highest of the lower three principles which constitute our human existence, this seminal flaw of division in its nature leads Aurobindo to conclude that mind cannot be the final goal of evolution. Mind is a passage, not a culmination. He declares, nevertheless, its role is of supreme importance. So don't throw it out yet.
Mhm.
So number 34 is Danielle's task.
The utmost mission of mind is to train our obscure consciousness, which has emerged out of the dark prison of matter, to enlighten its blind instincts, random intuitions, vague perceptions, till it shall become capable of this greater light and this higher ascension into the supermind, the life divine.
So it's playing a key role. Very important that we not dismiss it. So the individual who focuses their attention on the mental plane is regarded as a mental man or mental woman. This is a person in whom the mental faculty is so developed that it exerts control over the rest of the surface being. This includes the philosopher, thinker, scientist, intellectual creator, the man of the idea, the man of the written or spoken word, the idealist, and the dreamer. Through the force of mental will, these mental men succeed in transcending their physical needs and vital desires. If not completely, then to a significant extent, and roam in the mental plane. Joey says number 35 is here for you.
Mental men are able to lay on it, the lower surface, the law of a mental ideal, impose a balance or subliminating and refining influence, and give a high consistency to the multi-personal confusion and conflict or the summary patchwork of our divided and half-constructed being.
I don't know, some people might find it painful to think of themselves as a summary patchwork and a half-constructed being. But from the perspective that he's coming from, we'll see why he says that. We only know the surface. That's all we've been talking about recently. So this category of human beings represents the highest expression of nature, the normal summit of nature's evolutionary formation on the human plane. Aurobindo bases this judgment on mind's natural tendency towards observation and appreciation. As opposed to the surface physical and vital bodies, the mind is apt to be a disinterested witness, a judge, observer of things, more than an eager participant and passionate labor in the work, and therefore can arrive very readily at a spiritual or philosophic calm and detached aloofness. In this respect, mind, of all the components of the surface being, comes closest to imitating the attitude of its true self, nearest at least to its aspect of the all-conscious knower, who regards all activities but can stand back from them all. Consequently, the mind is regarded by Aurobindo as an indispensable aid to the realization of the divine. Now that's relatively uncommon for people in the spiritual field to say positive things about the mind, because they're usually eager to get rid of it, dismiss it altogether. Aurobindo uses the phrase indispensable aid advisedly. Although mind is better equipped to lead the surface personality than the physical or vital components, its leadership is maintained through suppression. To the best of their ability, The mental people sacrifice their vital urges and physical needs in their devotion to knowledge. Mental sovereignty, though, is always precarious. The repressed vital and physical natures are like rebellious prisoners, ready to sweep aside imposed restrictions at any moment. In the weak mental individual, they often succeed, plunging the surface being into chaos once again. The stronger mental person, while successfully quelling all insurrections, acquires a sense of lifelessness, of aridity. Their all-consuming preoccupation with abstract thought lends credence to the derogatory image of the intellectual locked in their ivory tower. If the mental individual was to direct their attention towards spiritual development, any spiritual realizations encountered on their path would be marred by this incompleteness. In Aurobindo's system of integral yoga, the primary emphasis is placed on a balanced and complete realization of the nature of reality. As he says, the only thing that is to be eliminated is our own unconsciousness, the ignorance and the results of the ignorance. In other words, not our vital and physical natures. Aurobindo is aware of the fact that humans have no choice but to rely on the mind for guidance until such time as more reliable guidance, emanating from the true leader of evolution, the psyche, begins to impress itself on their surface consciousness. He therefore cautions us against mistaking the mind as the supreme God, or supreme guide. Freudian slip there. He recommends that we regard it as an interim leader only, the highest instrument of guidance offered to us by nature, short of spirituality. This strategy will render the mind willing and able to serve its currently hidden master when the time best suited to its outward manifestation finally arrives. This will enhance the individual's progress considerably. For not only does it reduce mental resistance to higher forms of consciousness, it also fulfills one of the two new requirements demanded of the individual for further evolution to proceed. According to Aurobindo, future evolution will require the conscious effort of the human mind for its involvement. The conscious effort. Baha'i makes exactly the same point. The second requirement is for us to transcend the surface world as our field of development. It must be supplemented by the invisible realms of creation for us to evolve. And that's number 36, and I'm hoping Bill will read this one for us.
Nature has to use more amply the unseen material hidden below the surface to dive inwards and bring out the secret soul, the psyche, or to ascend above our normal mental level into planes of intuitive consciousness, dense with light, derived from the spiritual gnosis, ascending planes of pure spiritual mind in which we are in direct contact with the infinite, in touch with the self and highest realities of things. Satchitananda.
Satchitananda. Yeah, I should have put that in brackets as 3 separate words. Sanskrit is like German that way. It loves to build things into compound words. Okay, so this seems like a very good place for us to have our 1 or 2 minute break.